Welcome back. Last Sunday. What's up, guys? How you guys doing today? It's episode 28. We got a special guest, Mike Alvarez. Wait, you just told me how to say it.
I'm the young adult pastor.
Young adult pastor at Calvary Church. How you feeling?
I'm feeling great, man. I love being here. I love being here with you.
Yeah, we just talked basically a whole hour before we even started recording. So it's a good warm up. And yeah, man, thank you for coming out here, first of all. Thank you for being on the show.
Yeah, man, this is great. I love it. Love the set. Look at this. Last Sunday,
yeah,
you got the little wooden spoon back here.
Yeah.
I think my mom would hit me with one of those when I was a kid.
Fun story about that too. That actually used to be my grandma's. There was a fork that came with it.
Yeah. I think that's a Mexican thing.
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
okay,
I think so. It's like my grandma and my mom would have like a wooden spoon and a fork, and so I think I did get spanked a few times with the spoon.
I probably did. I just don't remember.
That was child abuse. DCFS.
Yeah. But remind me too, we got to get you on the wall. So I got to get a picture of you too.
Okay. Oh, I didn't these are the people you've interviewed?
Yeah, those are the people I've had on.
Gotcha.
That've been here though.
Oh, they've been here?
Yeah. Here to shoot last Sunday. I mentioned on the last episode I've been kind of on the road.
Yeah.
I shot at the Restoration Church and I did one at David, so I kind of been
nice
mobile,
Yeah. You're all over. You're at Good News. You're at Restoration Church, and then you drove me all the way out to Ottawa.
Yeah.
So this is great. This is great.
Gas prices are pretty high.
Yeah, gas prices are really high right now. So thank God.
So just to jump into it, man, where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Aurora. I mean, Aurora's like my hometown. Born and raised there, and my whole family's from Texas, but my mom moved to Aurora back in the 60s, something like that. And so born and raised there, lived all over the place in the city of Aurora, moved probably 20 some odd times all over the city, but born and raised there. And then started going to a church when I was about 3 months old. And oddly enough, which is the church I work for now.
Wow.
And
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So we started going there. So, most of the viewers probably don't know this, but, Calvary Church was primarily a white church, in Naperville. So it was just attracting all the nice, wealthy people, white people. And so my family were the first Hispanics to ever go to that church.
Wow.
And so, then ended up growing up and doing other things. But yeah, born and raised in Aurora, love Aurora, A-Town. And
you know the lingo too.
I know
amazing.
the lingo, yeah. I know the stats too of Aurora. Aurora's second largest city in the state of Illinois, second only to Chicago.
Yeah.
About 200,000 people. That's right, baby. And then downtown Aurora, I mean, within a 12-mile radius of downtown Aurora, there's 1.8 million people that live in that area.
Oh, wow.
And so 55,000 students that live in the city of Aurora. And so, I could shoot out stats for you that your viewers and your listeners would be absolutely bored with.
I mean, I'm learning too. I mean, I didn't even know all this stuff. I know it was the second largest city in Illinois, but yeah, that's right. Amazing.
City of Lights.
It's crazy to think about though. A lot of people don't usually stay where they grew up at. I feel like as you get older, you kind of eventually move or you go to a different church and stuff like that. So it's kind of interesting that you've been kind of where you grew up since you were 3 months. So
yeah, which was really interesting because when I started, I grew up at the church, and then about 19 years old, I went off to college, and then went to college in Springfield, Missouri. And then when I was there, when I was about the time when I was about to graduate, I had a friend of mine who I went to college with, started the church in Houston, Texas, and then his name was Joel, and Joel called me after he started the church a couple of years before, called me and invited me to come out on staff at the church. And so I worked for the church in Texas for a couple of years, and then ended up going on staff at the church in Phoenix, Arizona. And I've done ministry in Indiana and in St. Louis, started the church in St. Louis, started the church in Detroit. And so I've been kind of all over. And in that time span, by the time I was done with college to the time I moved back to Aurora was probably about a 12, 13 year gap. So
So you did your bit of traveling
I did my
around?
bit. Yeah, and which was great because it made me explore life, and then was doing a lot of traveling and speaking in different parts of the country, and which was really, really good. So I actually came on staff at Calvary Church on accident. It really wasn't. It wasn't anything I was planning for. I really wasn't working towards it. There was nothing about it that if somebody would have told me days before that this was going to be the turn of events for me, it just wasn't in the records.
It's crazy because like we were just talking about how like obviously I'm out here in the boonies, and how like you never expect where you're gonna be when you're doing where you were. You know what I mean? So it's like it's crazy to think about like you were at these different places and locations, and then you kind of just went back to where you started.
Yeah.
So, and I think sometimes we have to kind of go through that. In
Yeah.
life.
It was pretty crazy for me because I had started the young adult ministry in the city of Aurora, and did that for about 7 years, and then after I felt like God transitioning me out of that, and churches started becoming aware of what I was doing, and so started traveling and speaking at different places. I've fortunately for me, I've never called anybody to ask, if I could ask to speak at their places.
Yeah.
I've never sent a resume to a church. Churches have always contacted me, and when I was traveling and speaking, COVID hit, and then it shut down the world, and around that time I got COVID, and I think it was in COVID hit in 2020. So I think it was in December of 2020. I got COVID, and then I got really sick, and I was in the hospital for about 3 or 4 weeks. Could have died. It was really bad. And while I was in the hospital, you have these epiphany moments where you start questioning life, and you just start questioning your future. And I'm like, God, I don't know if I'm going to pull through this. And when I started to get a little bit better, I started to kind of pray and have conversations with God and say, okay, God, I feel like you're giving me a second chance. What is it that you want me to do in this next season of my life? Mm-hmm. And I just felt God just kind of like reaffirm my assignment in life was to specifically do ministry for like college age and young adults, like people between the ages of 20 and about 30 years old. And as a result of that, and again, I wasn't pursuing it by any means, that eventually opened a door to where I'm at today. And so it's been pretty crazy.
Yeah, I think when I met you too, I met you through Eric, but I remember you had Unnamed.
Eric Hilgers?
Yeah, Eric Hilgers. I remember you had Unnamed, and that was kind of like a young adults, and you were kind of already ministering through that. But I for some reason, like when I first met you, I felt like this guy got something like you just have like a different mindset on things, and you're very relatable. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's why probably God's kind of called you to that for young adults.
Yeah. I've always done my best to connect with people and build relationships with people, and I've always thought that pastors are kind of unapproachable people. Because I think there's this mindset that people think that a minister or a pastor is like the fourth part of the Trinity. It's like God, Jesus, Holy Spirit, and then the pastor, and like pastors are just unapproachable people. And so I never wanted to be unapproachable. Yeah. And I've always done my best to connect with people where they are. Mm-hmm. And so I have really high EQ. Mm-hmm. So there's like IQ, and then there's EQ. IQ measures your intelligence. EQ measures your emotional connection.
See, I'm learning stuff.
So I have really high EQ. My IQ is really low, but my EQ is really high. Yeah. And so it is very easy for me to feel people. Yeah. And so even in my leadership style, most people will measure things by systems and and processes, which that's really important. In my leadership style, I measure things by my EQ, by how I feel things through. And so I feel my way through how I'm leading, a ministry, the organization that I'm leading. And so it's, I can't stop that. So what it does for me is that it gives me high empathy for a lot of people. Yeah. So I feel people. And so when you're talking to me, it's almost like I can feel what you're experiencing or what you're going through. So it just tends to, it's very easy for me to become relatable to people because I find the connection.
I was going to say, why do you think that there's like, because I'm the similar, but I feel like sometimes too when you can kind of be, I feel like I'm open. Like I wear my heart on my sleeve. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of open with my emotions. People, like I could have a conversation with somebody and they can kind of already feel like how I feel in a way. And I feel like I'm the same way like when I have conversations with people. But sometimes I feel like some people can take advantage of that in a bad way. And I feel like as I'm growing and I'm growing into adulthood or whatever, we were just talking about this, but how do you manage that? How do you manage that point where you feel like someone's kind of taking advantage of you or, using you, I guess, in a way?
Yeah, and that's happened to me. I mean, people have used me. People have manipulated me, and the reality is that it's trial and error as you're building relationships with people. And so I've had relationships in my life that have been very hurtful, and I've had close friends that have hurt, but that's a part of life. That's a part of the process. But I think the more important thing is that And for me, like I have a very deep faith and I have a very deep conviction to love people where they are, and to make sure that I'm not like loving people because of their struggles or their issues. Sometimes we can fall in love with people's problems. No. And so because we feel sorry for them, and so we want to own their problem. And the reality is that God didn't call you or me to own people's problems. He did tell us to carry one another's burdens, but he didn't call us to own someone else's burden. Yeah. And so sometimes in the process of if you can own someone's burden, you end up getting manipulated or you end up getting used. And the reality is that sometimes people they're not trying to use you. They're not trying to manipulate you. The problem is that that's part of their toxic behavior, or that's part of their behavior that hasn't been it hasn't been refined. Yeah. And so you end up getting caught up in the washer of their mess. Yeah. And so sometimes the important thing is that when you're dealing with people, and I deal with this often, that
I was gonna say of like I feel like young adults are probably the ones that they're dealing with the most. Oh yeah, and it's
young adults, man. They can be an emotional group of people. Yeah, for sure. And I mean, one of my favorite demographics of people. I mean, if they weren't my favorite, I wouldn't be in what I do. But one of my favorite groups of people to interact with. But I've learned through the years that when you deal with people, whether they're a young adult or they're an older person, that you don't deal with the problem in the sense like people aren't the problem. Yeah. Whenever you're dealing with somebody, whether it's a good friend that has toxic behavior, you're not dealing with the person, you're dealing with their behavior. And so I'm not, when I address a person, I don't address them as the problem. I address their behavior as the problem. And so for me, it's like, hey, you're doing this and you're doing that. Man, that's not good for you if you keep on with this pattern. That's not healthy for you. That's not a sign of maturity. Yeah. Adults don't act like that. An emotionally healthy male or an emotionally healthy female doesn't act like that.
Yeah.
And so we address the behavior and we create processes and steps for them to hopefully mature and get better.
Yeah.
So
I catch myself kind of like being that guy that's kind of there for somebody. Mm-hmm. And then I kind of, like you said, I kind of carrying their burdens, and then it drains my energy. And then I'm like, what am I doing? Like, I can't do this. Like, I got too many things that I'm trying to work on myself for me to try to like take your burdens when I have mine. And it's just the whole process. But like what you're saying, it's like kind of opening my eyes. Like, you're not carrying that person's. They have their behavior that they need to fix, and you're kind of just like trying to help them as much as you can in a way, but you shouldn't really be carrying that.
Yeah, you shouldn't. And I've gotten lost in people's behavior and all that stuff because you love a person or you want to help them, but the reality is that that you're not responsible for them at the end of the day. You asked me the question, how do you not get used or manipulated? But the reality is that if you're a Christ follower and you're called to people, you are always going to get in some form used or manipulated in some way. That is the sacrifice we make when we come alongside people and we help people. But the reality is that you have to know when you are coming alongside people that somebody is going to use you. Someone is going to try and manipulate you. That's happened to me many times. Is it hurtful? Yes. Do you feel betrayed? 100%. Yeah. But at the same time, you come back to God and I have conversations with God and I just say, God, don't let me get bitter. Don't let me get angry, but help me to love people the way you love people. Help me to see people the way you see people. And you keep on pushing forward.
What you're saying too, because I'm thinking like we talk about bitterness and all this, and we don't realize like kind of like what God had to deal with. Like Jesus literally was like he was like dodging murder, and they wanted to kill him, and eventually they did, but he always kind of showed humbleness. Mm-hmm. And I'm kind of like I look at it like that's what I kind of want to do too. Like I want to be humble. I want to turn the other cheek and I don't know if I'm taking that out of scripture, but because you would know more than me, but it's like a saying that people always say, like turn the other cheek. And I feel like humbleness will always prevail also too, because I feel like you said we can get bitter when someone hurts us. Yeah. But if you kind of just show that humbleness and kind of say, hey, like it's not me, this is them trying to make me in a way. Sometimes they, like you said, they don't even realize that they're trying to make you feel like this. Mm-hmm. And sometimes like you can address it, but other times they still won't, mm-hmm. But I just feel like, you just kind of have to show humbleness and be humble to whenever you get these times of bitterness and anger and kind of go to God and bring it to God.
Yeah. I think that in many ways, like when you're coming alongside people, and again, I find myself in this place often when you're working with young adults, but you're constantly coming alongside people and you're helping them, you're coaching them. Yeah. You in many ways, like I never like to say I'm a counselor. I don't like counseling people, but I do a lot of life coaching with people. Yeah. And I ask a lot of questions and I channel people, and I get asked this question often, like, this is not, I don't mean this as a braggadocious statement, but and I hate saying this, but this is what people have said to me, so I'm quoting other people. People have asked, like, how are you so wise, Mike? Like how do you know stuff? And for me, I learned a long time ago that that used to stress me out, especially when I first went in the ministry. Like it would scare me because I'm like, man, I don't have the answers for everything. I'm young. When I was first in ministry, I'm like young, and I don't know how to help people. I don't know, like even in preaching, when I come up with sermons, like I don't have all the answers for everything. And I learned a long time ago that my job isn't to have all the answers. My job is to have all the questions. And so I don't need to spend time trying to hope and pray that when someone comes to me and asks me a question about life, that I have to have the answer. My job is to explore the possibility of question asking and asking them questions that will ultimately get us to an answer or move us to a place of an inch closer to success. And so that's really the key to it in many ways. So I stopped stressing over trying to come. I mean, I have tons of people that I meet with every single week that are calling me, texting me, DMing me, wanting to like set up appointments. And, I think to anybody else, people would be like, oh, that would stress me out because people are constantly wanting to meet with you. And I have people in different parts of the country that are reaching out to me, pastors and young adult pastors, and the fear is like, do I have all the answers? And I don't. I mean, I don't have to have all the answers. I just got to have all the questions that will help us get to the answer.
Absolutely. That's amazing, man. And I never really thought about that. And I was going to say, like, this is like the moment where I feel like we were just talking about, like, me trying to help somebody learn. And then these are the moments where, like, I'm learning. Like, this is the process of me growing because me listening to you, I'm kind of like, man, like, I never thought about like that. And I turn, like, this is what Last Sunday's about, man. Like, we're trying to just help you grow. And
that's so good.
I just like got a moment right now. I was just like, dang, man, this is what it is. This is what it is. Like, it's just trying to like grow as a person. And that's great. Like what you're saying is you got to kind of ask those questions to get to that answer. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, that's the key to growth too, Angel. I think sometimes like for us, we want to read a book and all that, which is great. Like I encourage you, read a book, pick up a book and read it. I'll be honest with you. I don't like reading. People think, people think like, oh, you're a pastor or Mike, you sound smart. That's what people say. I would never say that I'm smart. People have said like, oh, you sound smart or whatever. Like you must love to read. And I'm like, no, I actually don't like to read. But I
you know what I think it is? It's the glasses.
It's the wooden glasses, yes.
That's what it is.
That is the only cool thing about me, by the way, is my wooden glasses. These are handmade, by the way, wooden glasses.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. But, people have said that. And my thing is like, I don't like to read, but what I like is information. I like knowing. And so in order for me to know, in order for me to gain knowledge, I have to read. Or I have to explore. Now, the other thing is I tend to meet with people often, and I meet with people with the idea, with the mindset that I think of people like a library book, and just like a person would check out a book to gain information or whatever the case might be. And this will sound weird, I check out people. That sounds so weird. Sorry. I check people out. That even sounds weirder. And I meet with them. Yeah. And what I do is I don't sit down with them and explore every aspect of their life because I would sit there for hours. What I do is when I sit down and I meet with people, I ask them questions based on the season of life I'm in. And so for me, if I am walking through a season of growth in the area of leadership, which that's the season I'm in right now, because I've realized, you know what you know, then you know what you don't know, and then you don't know what you don't know. And so I'm in a season right now where
you don't know, no.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm in a season right now where the ministry I'm leading is growing, and we are seeing amazing things happen in what we're doing. And I'm building teams, and there are parts of it that come natural to me, and there are parts of it that don't come natural to me. And I'm not a born leader. There are some people that seem like they're born leaders. I am not a born leader. I always tell people that I'm not a bad leader or a good leader. I'm a learning leader. And so I'm constantly learning how to lead. Yeah. And so for me, I'm constantly inviting people into my life, picking up the phone, FaceTiming people, Zooming people, leaders, and I'm saying, help me understand, help me grow so that I can be a growing leader. And so I will ask people questions based on the season of life I'm in, and just so I can continue to grow. And then I usually end up in I'll ask a couple of questions at the very end, like, hey, what question should I have asked you that I didn't ask you? Like, who do you think could help me? Who in your list of names could help me in the season of life I'm in? Could you give me a name? And so they'll usually give me a name. What resource or what book would you recommend for me to pick up and read that would help me in the season of life I'm in? Right. So I'm asking questions that are pushing me to move forward, pushing me to grow. So for me, like, it is the same thing of like checking out a book. When you read a book, some of the authors are quoting other authors. Yeah. They're quoting other leaders. That's the same thing you're doing when you sit down and you talk to somebody.
Exactly. And we all have to get something from somebody.
Absolutely.
Like, it's like, Jordan Peterson?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
He talks about how, like, in biblical times and like, that's what it was about. Like, it's just people sharing these stories.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Obviously, Jesus is real. I believe in God. But like what he was saying, because he's a non-Christian, but he was saying that's what it is, that's what the Bible is. It's stories that were shared at that time.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's what we're all doing right now, in a sense, is we're just sharing stories or ideas off of each other to try to like you said, get the answers.
And even in that too, sorry, I know you're going on to something, but even in that, like, there are ideas and then there are principles.
Yeah.
Like in a principle is an unchanging truth.
Yeah.
For example, there's the principle of gravity. What goes up must come down, right? It's an unchanging truth. Right. And I think in Scripture, when you read the Bible, there are lessons and then there are principles that God teaches or the Bible teaches that are unchangeable truths.
Yeah.
And so we invite those truths into our lives and we live them out because they are principles that will never change. What you sow, you will reap.
Yeah.
Right? That's a principle. That's an unchanging truth.
Yeah.
And so we adopt those things into our lives and we live that out.
Yeah, and you were talking about books, and like I want, there's like a couple of books that I want to read that I haven't read, and it's hard for me to read. And I always I feel like God's kind of telling me, like, don't read any of these books. You need to read the Bible. So it's like it's trying to, you know what I mean? And I kind of feel like, man, you're right. And right when I like go to buy a book, that I feel like, let me try and see if this will help me. I feel like I'm on the Amazon and I'm about to. It's like there, and then like God's like, what are you doing? Like, go read the Bible. Like, right. This is what you need. This is what's going to grow you and give you the answers that you need. And I feel like a lot of times we kind of, I'm guilty of it because I can't. I have this like, I gotta go. And I don't know if it's the creative side of me, but it's hard for me to sit down and just read a book and, any book, honestly.
Yeah.
But,
so what I would recommend to somebody like you is that for a creative person, because you're very creative, it's a hard thing for a creative person to sit down and read. So what I always recommend is do what you can to read, but also spend more time talking with people, spend more time interviewing people, spend more time building networks with people, because that's where you're going to get more information, or the same kind of information that you would get from a book. Yeah. Because that's what creative people need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can get in this this stump of like, I'm not growing. Where do I go to seek this knowledge? Yeah. And it's like you said, it's growing these connections and with different relationships with people, and it's learning, feeding off people.
Absolutely.
I was gonna ask you, man, what was the main reason why you chose young adult ministry?
That's a good question. I think. When I started out in vocational ministry, in other words, where I was getting vocational ministry is basically where you get paid to do ministry. initially when I interned for a church, and I always thought I'm going to be either an evangelist. An evangelist, if you're not familiar with that term, evangelist is basically someone who just travels to churches and speaks at different places. So we would call them like itinerant speakers, just people that would travel around and speak. I thought that's what I was going to do. I wasn't much of a people person growing up. I was very shy and just didn't care to connect with people. And so I thought, oh, that's what I'm going to do. And then eventually I thought like, oh, I'm going to be a senior pastor, like a lead guy. And then I got suckered into doing an internship for junior high ministry and working with middle school students. Yeah. And in that, I just really fell in love with doing ministry to the next generation. And that was like 25 years ago. And from that point to this point, I've always been put back into next generation ministries. And so I think eventually I've just learned to not like working with old people, and so I would fall into that category of old people. But
yeah, I seen the shirt too. I'm like Nintendo 64.
That's right. And
I'm like, way to show your age,
that's
man.
right.
Come
that's
on.
Right. Yeah, this is nostalgic right here. This is nostalgia, and so and people have always told me that I work really well with next generation people, mm-hmm. and one of the conversations I have with senior pastors and leaders is that they tell me that I'm an enigma, meaning I'm kind of a mystery to doing next generation ministry, because statistically they say that you are most relevant to people within the 10-year radius of whatever your age is. So if you're 20 years old, the most effective way you would be is that you would be relevant to a 30-year-old or a 10-year-old, right? And so we are the most effective within the 10-year radius of your age. Well, I exceed that. I mean, like I'm in my 40s, and so, but I'm connecting with 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds, and so to pastors and senior pastors, they tell me often like I'm an enigma, I'm a mystery, because I connect with that, and young people actually like to hang out with me. Yeah. And so it's and I think for me it's just, I think it's God's anointing on my life to minister to that demographic. So, and I have a passion to reach the next generation for people, and to equip and to resource and to speak into their lives, and I just enjoy it. I love it. Yeah, that's like the first thing I've kind of noticed from you when I first met you. You got this comfortability, and I don't know, just like you're like a Theo. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? Hey, you're like a Theo. You're like a like an uncle, a good uncle that that's the type of vibe that I got from you. And yeah, you have this relatability and openness. So I think that's probably why. I mean, I'm speaking for myself as a young adult. Yeah. This is probably the things that I've seen. From you. Which is something I just absolutely enjoy. And I think we were talking about this before we started the podcast. But I do whatever I can to debunk the stereotype of what a pastor should, or what we think a pastor should be. Yeah. And so, and I think that I think you may have asked me this question, or maybe you sent me this question. Yeah. But I think that the question you had actually sent to me was, why do young people, or why do guys and girls don't like God? I think. Why do you feel young men and women stay far from God? Stay far from God, yeah. So I don't know if it's. There is that. But I think that it's not so much about, I think men and women stay far from God. I think men and women stay far from the church. I think that people are actually interested in God. They're just not interested in the church. And so I think that one of the things that we see that's troubling in culture today, in society today, is that while they are very much interested in the spirituality, and the reason why we know that is because they'll watch things like Stranger Things. They'll watch things like Fourth Season just dropped yesterday, and then people are interested in Marvel stuff. Like you got Doctor Strange, and
I still haven't seen that one either.
It's actually pretty dark.
Yeah.
But I mean, people are very much interested in that, and they're interested in I mean, you look at Amazon Prime, you look at Hulu, and all these shows are coming out that deal with spiritual stuff. So Hollywood culture has an understanding that this generation, you have millennials, you have Gen Z, and then you have the generation coming up after Gen Z, which is the Alpha, the Alpha generation, very much interested in spirituality. So it's not that they don't believe it exists. It's not that they're not interested in it.
Yeah.
They are very much interested in it. The problem is that they don't feel that the church is addressing those issues.
Yeah.
And so people are disinterested in the church. And the other side of it is that you have like the pandemic that hit the church, and where you've seen the attendance drop off. Yeah. And I think that one of the things we've learned from the pandemic, where you see the attendance of people that stop going to church, and they're not coming back, is that we've discovered that the difference between people that were in love with the church over people that were in love with Jesus. And so so people were in love with the church, and then when the church closed down,
they stopped going
because they weren't connected to God. They weren't connected to their relationship with God. They were just connected to the church. Yeah. And so it was a big fall. So I think that in many ways, we have to help people understand who God is, and what his role is in your life and in my life. And I think once that connection happens, I think people will begin to grow in their relationship with God, because people are interested.
Also too, it's like morally, like, I don't know if it's just me, but like, I feel like when you go into a house of God, like a church, I feel like as a young adult, you kind of know, like, this is where you're supposed to be. I don't know if it's just me, like it's the Holy Spirit, but like I've known, like when I first stepped into the church when I was 16, I was with Eric and all these things. I remember going in there and I just felt like I felt the Holy Spirit, and I'm like, this is where I need to be. And I feel like sometimes as young adults, we kind of just push that away. We kind of just like, I don't like this. I don't want to feel like this. But I feel like in a way it's like God calling you to seek him. Yeah. And so like, I don't know. That's how I feel.
Yeah. Well, I think like that. I mean, young people do have an attraction to God, but I think primarily they have an attraction to being around their peers. Yeah. And so whenever I meet with older leaders, people that are senior pastors or something like that, one of the things I tell them that's a great distinct between Gen Xers, like people that are older, over like millennials and Gen Z and all that. I said, if you gathered a bunch of older adults, like our parents, and you gathered them in one room and you invited them to an event, and they decided if they were going to go to that event, the number one question they would ask you is, what do you want me to bring? Yeah, right. Yeah. But if I put your age demographic in that same room, we invited them to that same event, the number one question your generation will ask is, who's all going to be there? Yeah. Right? Wow. Because the difference is that this generation will make decisions based on the context of relationship, right? Where the older generation will make decisions based on the context of individuality. Wow. And so but the problem is that in many ways the church will ask a young person questions of individual basis, and they're afraid to make a commitment, they're afraid to make a decision. But if you ask them in the context of relationship, people will collectively make that decision, and they'll jump and move on that. So people that grow in their relationship with God, people that will show up to church and you're like, man, I belong here. Like, well, part of that decision making for you was that the relationships around you felt that too. And so you were making that decision based on your friends, your circle that was making that decision too.
Absolutely. Thinking about it back on like when I was 16 going to Calvary, it was like that. Because I remember like we would go on the church bus and everybody was going, and it was just like you felt good, you know, and it was just, yeah, now that you say it like that, like, yeah, it really was the relationship of who was there and who was all going, and the fellowship of talking about God and trying to, you know, move God forward and trying to show people Christ as well. So, but yeah, that's crazy. You think about it like that. That's really what it is. Like, people do that. They're like, who's going to be there?
yeah. Exactly. And I would tell you that even today, you know, if you ever find yourself in a place of transitioning in your heart where you feel like, oh, I feel like life is transitioning me, and you feel a little lost.
Yeah.
Part of that lostness that you feel, and it's hard for you to make those decisions concrete, or it's hard for you to figure out the answers, because in many ways you want somebody to tell you what that is. What that next step is, because we're so accustomed in this generation for us to make decisions based in the context of relationship. And so that, which is very difficult, because it's difficult for us to do things on our own. So I would tell you that as you're making decisions, or people are making decisions, like, learn to be okay with making a decision that's good for you. That's good for helping you grow in your faith, grow in your relationships, grow in your leadership, and try not to bring in other people. Now, you're a different story because you have a family, but you know, the goal is to not try to make decisions based on what is my friend going to do, and I'm, you know, should I switch churches?
Yes,
should I go to a different church? Well, I got to bring my friends with me too, because I can't make this decision by myself.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, we get in that like kind of like, yeah, it's crazy because we do.
Yeah. It's a good thing in some ways. It's a bad thing in other ways because it's unhealthy. And
also too, I feel like I've talked about this before, but I feel like also too, we make a lot of our decision based on other people.
Absolutely.
As young adults, like, I felt like I've always kind of like, well, that's what it is. It's like we want to look good, you know. We want people to like look at us, like, you know what I mean. So it's like a lot of times we want to fit in.
Yeah.
And I think as you get older, like me at 24, I'm like, I got a family. What am I fitting in for?
Yeah.
And I feel like your mindset kind of changes, and I feel like that's changed for me. But I as like I was saying, like sometimes I'll have conversations with my younger brother, and I'll talk to him, and I'm like, man, I remember when I was like that. I remember when I used to make decisions off of, like, you know what I mean, other people, or and kind of like, you know, want to be the man, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And we also make those decisions based on, we want affirmation. We want to be affirmed. We want to feel good that we're making those decisions. And then sometimes we'll make a decision, but we'll do it with a question mark in back of it. Yeah. And we're waiting for someone else to affirm that decision. And sometimes you just need to know where you're going. Yeah. Like you may not have a specific target of what you're aiming at, but maybe sometimes it's in general, like where in general am I going? Yeah. Like, I'm raising a family, I'm gonna get married soon, I'm gonna have a kid. So where am I in general going? I'm in generally going to, I want to have a thriving marriage. I want to have the best kid in the world. I want to make the investment into my son the way I want to. That target may not be specifically clear, but at some point you should make it clear. But in general, you know where you're going, which means that your life is going to look very different than a single friend's life. Right? And so you can't make decisions anymore based on what my single friend is doing, because your life is very different. Your season of life is very different. Yeah. And so there are more collective decisions that are being made in your circle than there are in that circle. Yeah. And you know what? You know, me and Allison talked about this, and we feel like we were like, she's into like the homesteading and you know, living off your own food and stuff like that. Like, I'm slowly turning into a country boy, you know what I mean? But I saw some chickens earlier. There you go. Yeah. I want to own a ranch too. But I feel like that's what it's about. I feel like we kind of this generation has gone differently as far as like
before was you work a job, you get married young, and you start a family.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like now it's kind of like young adults are kind of a little bit more like, what do I do? You know what I mean? And I felt like when I had my son, it's like you said, it gives you kind of like a purpose of what do I want my son to look at me like? You know what I mean? Because that's how I kind of like move my day to day. Like what would I do that I want my son to look up to me in the right way? And it's moving those things. So like, you know, being a man of God, showing him how to live sustainably. Because I feel like a lot of people don't do that. Yeah. So if anything happens, he knows how to grow his own food and stuff like that. Giving him a foundation, a great home, family home to live on, where there's no drama and stuff like that. So I feel like you said, like, you know, it's two different seasons of life when it comes to somebody that is single and then somebody that's growing a family. And I feel like, but that's what I feel like what we're here for. You know, is to grow a family, is to get married and have children and you know, and have a foundation of God. Yeah. And I feel like we strayed away from that, you know, and I think that's the main reason why a lot of people are just lost, you know, young adults.
And I think sometimes in some ways that some people don't know where to start. And they know they need to move forward. They know they need to, like you were just saying a moment ago, like I know I need to be a man of God. Well, I mean, and that's true. And all of us, me, you know, all of us that are Christ followers, and we believe in God, and we believe that Christ is at the center of our lives, and He's the filter in which we make all decisions through. But the you know, the real question behind what you said was, yeah, I need to be a man of God, but like, what does that mean to be a man of God? Like, what processes, what steps need to occur? So that way, when you understand that clearly, you can help your son walk through those steps. Yeah. It's not just about not stealing. It's not about not committing murder. It's not about not having an affair or stepping out on your spouse. But really, it's about what are your daily consistencies that help you be a man of God, so that, because things are more caught than taught. And so when your son watches you, he is seeing you and he is catching what you're doing. Yeah. Then you verbally saying to him, this is what you need to do, X, Y, and Z. Yeah. Right? Your fiance is watching you more than just hearing you say X, Y, and Z. Yeah. Right? So those things are more caught than taught. So that means that in order for you to be a man of God, there are processes that you need to create for yourself that make things consistent. There's a book called The Slight Edge that's out there. It's a really good book. And he talks about that it's the small decisions in life that will get you to where you want to go. There's another book called Atomic Habits.
I've read that one. Yeah, that one's great.
Yeah, that runs along the same idea of that. So, you know, it's those things that help you be the man of God you want to be. You know, the Bible says, don't despise the days of small beginnings. It's the small things that get you there.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So
that's crazy, because like I look at it like the coop outside that we're building, that's like the small beginning, because of what I want to do is own a ranch. But I never thought that we would get the coop to where it is. I never thought that we'd have chickens in the bathroom.
Yeah, it's in the bathroom. When I went to the bathroom, I ran into a few chickens in there.
So. But that's crazy, because that's what it is. You know, it's these small steps to get to where you want to go. And then I think it's all part of God's purpose, you know. And I look at it like, I don't know, man. I just know that God has His hand over my life, and I feel as if He wants me to be that example of this generation as well, because I do think that we have this mindset of, you know, I don't want to get married, I don't want to do that, you know, and I feel like it's part of it is that we don't have men as fathers growing up in the church, living the life that we're supposed to, of like men of God. And I think that kind of just, you know, can mess things up. Because if you look back in the old times, like back when, before we had all this technology and all this stuff, I feel like people live simple lives then. You know, you go to work, you feed your family, you have a small farm or you own a farm, and you go to church every Sunday and you show your kids how to do this and doing that. Then I feel like I want to go back to that old life of living, because I don't know. I don't know. I feel like God's kind of just leading me back there. Yeah. So if I can help people to want to do that, that'd be great.
Yeah. And I think, there's nothing wrong with that. You're I think we're plugged into so many things that there are a lot of voices that speak into our lives. And so whether that's Instagram, TikTok, there are lots of stuff that are speaking into our lives. And so it's hard for God to be the only voice. Yeah. Because the other voices are speaking there. And you have a lot of philosophies that are out there that sound like truth, but it's not truth. Yeah. And so, but people say them with such deep conviction that it sounds like truth. Yeah. And so one of the things that we have to do as men of God, as people that are committed to the faith, people that are committed to Christ being the filter of our lives and the center of our lives,
to read the Bible.
Is to read the Bible, but also to discern what is truth. And so for us, like I said, there are people that say things with such deep conviction, online, whether you're watching an Instagram post or you're watching some story and you see somebody saying something that sounds like truth because they're saying it with such deep levels of conviction, but is it the truth? And so I think that's the one thing that we have to decipher through all the time. So for you to kind of step away from certain things in order to have the right things come into your mind and come into your heart, I think it's a smart thing. I think people getting off of Instagram, social media, social platforms is a good thing.
You see the best of everything on social media. You don't see like the worst. So it's like you have this idea of, oh, I wish I was like that. I wish I was like this. And I have never been like that when it comes to social media, but I can see like why someone can compare themselves to other people and have this, mindset of, I wish I had this, I wish I had that. And I think that's why people lose that thing. And I think that's what it's about. It's like you kind of have to pull away from that.
You do?
Because you can get wrapped up, man. There's times I'm just like, and then I'm like, what am I doing? Like, I'm wasting my time. I need to be working on the podcast. I need to be working on the chicken coop. I need to be, you know what I mean? I used to play video games. So I had a PS4. I used to play hours of video games. Yeah. Fallout 4 was my game. If you like Fallout, it's game's fire. But I sold it. I sold my PS4. I got the mics and I put my time into something that's going to be more productive.
That's good.
Just because I feel like as much time as we say we have, I feel like we don't really, because we do waste it on a lot of things that don't really matter. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to be that type of guy. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it's pushing the envelope to being uncomfortable. It's kind of like the atomic habits. It's changing your habits. And that's basically what I just don't want to be comfortable. Yeah. I want to be uncomfortable, man.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's kind of how I've learned to live my life lately is through the lens of uncomfortability. Anytime you want to move forward, you are always going to create a place of uncomfortability because forward means change. Yeah. And forward means letting go. And forward means not looking back. And so for me, I'm at a place where it's like, I don't want to look backwards anymore. Backwards to me is stuff that I needed to let go of, stuff I needed to move away from, stuff that was holding me back. And so forward means change and progression and what does God have for me. Yeah. And so that was a big thing. So you have to have that different mindset for sure.
Definitely as a young adult too. Mm-hmm. I was gonna ask, man, as your time as a youth, I want to say youth, young adult pastor. Young adult, yeah. Get it right, Angel. Don't mess up. Yeah. What was probably the most dramatic change you've seen in somebody that you ministered or that you had?
I would say that, man, I've seen a lot of shifts in people's lives for sure. I would say, not to go into too much detail, but I would say there's one particular person that I spent a lot of time with that was involved in a certain lifestyle that was just questionable and very what the Bible would just call sin.
Yeah.
And sin simply means missing the mark. I mean, sin is I think sometimes we interpret that term as an evil term. And the reality is that it is evil, but in the sense that God says, hey, this is the thing that keeps you from me. And so sin is a term, it's an archery term back in the old days. It simply means missing the mark. Like, so, the Bible tells us in Romans, for all have sinned and come short, or for all have missed the mark and come short of God's expectations. So, I mean, there was this guy that was living a lifestyle that was just, the Bible would clearly say that's sin. And
missing the mark.
Yeah, he would just miss the mark, just like me. I missed the mark. And he just said, hey, I don't want to live this lifestyle anymore. This lifestyle is just, it's rough. And it was just very difficult for him to escape that, because everything about his life, everything about how he lived his life, everything about how he made decisions in life, everything about his social media all pointed towards that lifestyle. Mm-hmm. And when he came to me about 5 years ago or so, we just began to wrestle out loud as to what it means to start thinking different, start inching our way towards what is healthy way of living. And through the course of that, we began to see this metamorphosis take place in his life, this massive turn towards right living, towards godly living, and towards biblical living. And I saw that change in his life. But I think more importantly too, Angel, I think, I've seen a lot of people see their lives change, but I think the biggest life change probably has been my life over what I have been involved with, and just ministering to people and speaking into people's lives. Again, I don't feel like I have all the answers, but as a result of my own life, I mean, I lived a horrific childhood growing up. I think I would be a psychologist and therapist dream to sit down and dissect my mind and my emotions because of all that I've walked through in life. But I think where counselors and therapists would say, how are you not like a drug addict? How have you not committed suicide? How have you not done those things? And I would say, through the grace of God, and as a result of me talking to people and seeing myself in people's lives and finding, and God using those people to find healing in my own life, I think that's been the biggest change, is seeing my life move from a place of emotional bankruptcy to this place of where I feel like I'm thriving and I'm growing and I'm understanding God better, and I'm growing in my relationship with God. So I think that probably for me has been the biggest life change that I've seen, is just looking in the mirror and saying, you're different. And people saying, you're different. Yeah. And I think that's been the biggest change.
Is there anything biblically, because you're a pastor, you gotta know this.
Oh no, I'm on the spot.
Is there anything biblically that, because I've mentioned this before, like how God would put you through these things to kind of share that and share your testimony and kind of help people through your mistakes and through the things that you went through in life? Is there anything that biblically that kind of supports that? Like do you a verse that that says like your trials, use it to show other people?
For me, I think I don't know if this is a life verse. Some people have life verses, like they say like, this is the theme of my life in this Bible verse. I would say if I had one, it would be Psalm 139. That when the writer of Psalms, when he's having a conversation with God and he finds himself in a broken place, because I have found myself many, many times in broken places, where I've just been in many ways a broken human being, because of all the mistakes, because of all the stupid things I've done, because of where I thought love and life was at. Mm-hmm. And I would go to those places and I would just ruin myself as a result of that. The writer talks about, he's praying this prayer and to God, and he just says, God, point out anything in me that offends you so that you can lead me to everlasting life. Mm. And he says, search my heart, O God, and know me. That's what he says. Search my heart, God, and know me. Point out anything in me that offends you. Right. And so for me, sometimes, and I'm sure you've heard stories like this, where somebody will go to see their doctor for some kind of checkup, and they're in good health, and then the doctor comes back with a report that says you have cancer or you have leukemia or something like that, and the person says, but I feel fine, but the doctor says, but you're not fine. Yeah. Right, because there's something inside of you that's wrong. And I think in so many ways we walk through life thinking that we're okay because I don't feel a conviction towards something. I don't feel broken by something. And what we do is we give God permission, like the writer of Psalms, and we say, God, I may not feel the pain, the brokenness, the hurt, the limp. Mm-hmm. And so, God, would you search my heart? I give you permission to enter into my personal home, start opening up doors inside my home, and point out in me things that offend you. Because right now I feel okay, but I need to know, God, that there's something in my life that's not right. I need for you to point that out. Because what I want at the end of the day is for you to show me so that you can lead me back to you. Yeah. I think that's where people walk in humility. People walk in a place of consistent restoration, consistent hope, is the fact that I give God permission to explore areas of my life. So I think for me, that's kind of my life verse, is that God point out those things in me. Yeah. So you can help me do right. That's
amazing, man. Yeah. I need to read the Word of God more. Clearly. Yeah. I'm like, do you know a scripture that supports it? But, man, just to wrap things up, I was going to ask you, this is a question I always ask. I try to ask everybody on the podcast. If there's one thing that you could tell your younger self, what would it be?
Trust the process. I wish that somebody would have told me in my childhood, when my life was pretty chaotic as a kid growing up. I grew up in a very abusive home, physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, verbally. I mean, in all aspects. I grew up in that. Dad left when I was 3 months old. And Dad wanted nothing to do with my family. My father was married to 5 different women at the same time he was married to my mom, has multiple amounts of children. I have an older, mentally challenged brother. My mom had to work 3 jobs. We worked, and we lived in homeless shelters. We lived in our car. And I was molested from 3 years old to about 7 years old. And so I experienced just brokenness and abandonment and so much hurt and so much pain that in so many ways, no one came to my rescue. No one was there to support me in any way. I never had a mentor. I never had any of that in my life. The first time I was ever hugged by a guy was when I was 16 years old. And because my own family members, my grandfather, my uncles, wouldn't spend any time with me. My grandfather didn't like me. And so if somebody would have said to me throughout the course of my life, Mike, trust the process. God is bringing you through something that even now, even through your brokenness, through your hurt, through your pain, like God has something for you. And if somebody would have said that to me, like that would have potentially changed maybe some trajectories of my life. Yeah. But I would say, trust the process. Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing, man. Amazing. Probably like one of the best podcasts I've had.
Really?
Yeah, honestly. Your wisdom is great and very open, and I appreciate you coming on, man. Yeah. I appreciate everything that you're saying, like you're speaking to me, cuz like I've been through these situations in my life too where like I felt lost, and I felt like there was no one reaching out. And I feel like you are part of the story of where my life has gone as well, with Eric and Unnamed, and having all these different men in my life. So it's amazing, bro, just to have you on the podcast and be here today. And
yeah, you bet, man. And I think, like, I mean, God has so much for you, Angel. I mean, we've had this conversation like off the podcast, but man, I just, to watch you grow and to see you becoming the person that you are, and how God is evolving you and growing you and maturing you, I mean, to me, is probably one of the most amazing things to see. And maybe not having the best influences in your life, that in many ways I see people like you, like this is very old school, but like I forget what you call it, like a pinball machine. If you ever played a pinball machine, you launch that ball out, and that ball, it has a destination. It's supposed to go somewhere. It's supposed to hit a goal. And it's supposed to reach that goal. The problem is that when that ball is being launched out, it's bumping and slamming into things, right? And it's gaining points, right? But it's bumping and slamming things. Ultimately, it's going to reach a goal. And I think for you, so many ways that life launched you out, and you've slammed into things, bumped into things, and you're scoring in many ways, but you've slammed into so many things. And at some point, God is using those things to form you and create the person that you're supposed to be. And he is shaping you into the man of God that you're supposed to be. And at some point, you're going to reach that goal, that purpose in life. But all this is part of the process.
Amen.
All this is trusting the process and knowing that God is on your side. And he which has, created you is calling you to great things, and is calling you to do great things, and he's shaping you and building you up. And so God is doing great things in your life.
Appreciate it, man. I'm just trying to just keep taking the right steps and make sure that I'm bumping into the right things. And I know, because he speaks to me throughout the whole day. Like, I know he's like, telling me this, telling me to do that. So I'm just trying to, like you said, just keep moving forward and trust the process.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Absolutely.
Thank you, man. Thank you for coming on last Sunday. I appreciate you taking the time to do this.
You bet.
Amazing episode. Amazing. If you didn't learn something today, I don't know what you're listening to, because, pastor, a young adult pastor.
Yeah.
Mike Alvarez, man. Thank you, man.
Yeah, you bet, man. My pleasure.
See you guys on the next one. Peace.